The screams echoed through the Blue Ridge Mountains as Elena's brother-in-law Marco dragged her deeper into the wilderness, her 8-month pregnant belly making every step a struggle. But what he thought would be her final resting place among the wolves would soon become the beginning of a legend that would unite two worlds in ways no one could have imagined. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The autumn wind cut through the dense canopy of the Whispering Pines Reserve like a blade, carrying with it the scent of pine needles, damp earth, and something far more dangerous. Elena Vasquez clutched her swollen belly as Marco's rough hands shoved her forward along the narrow deer trail, her feet stumbling over roots and rocks that seemed to reach up from the forest floor like grasping fingers. "Please, Marco," Elena whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of snapping twigs beneath their feet. "Think about what Carlos would say if he knew what you were doing to his wife and child." Marco's bitter laugh sent chills down Elena's spine. The man who had once been her husband's closest friend now looked at her with eyes filled with nothing but greed and resentment. "Carlos is dead, Elena. Dead and buried for 3 months now. And with him gone, everything he owned comes to me as next of kin. Everything except you and that bastard child you're carrying." Elena's hand instinctively moved to protect her unborn baby, feeling the strong kicks that told her the little one was fighting, even from within the womb. Carlos had been so excited about becoming a father, spending hours talking to her belly, and planning the nursery in their small cabin near Cedar Falls Township. He had died in a logging accident just as the first snow began to fall, leaving Elena alone with nothing but memories and the child he would never meet. "The insurance money is mine by rights," Marco continued, his breathing heavy as they climbed higher into the mountains. $200,000 that should have been mine from the start. But as long as you and that baby are alive, the lawyers say half of it belongs to Carlos's heir." The trail wound deeper into territory that Elena had never seen before. Even though she had lived in the shadow of the Blue Ridge Mountains her entire life, ancient pines towered overhead, their branches so thick they blocked out most of the afternoon sunlight. Somewhere in the distance she could hear the sound of running water, probably Thunder Creek that Carlos had always talked about visiting, but had never found the time to explore. "You can't just leave me out here," Elena pleaded, her voice growing stronger despite her fear. "I'm 8 months pregnant. I could go into labor at any time." "That's exactly what I'm counting on," Marco replied coldly. "These mountains are full of wolves, bears, and other predators. By the time anyone finds your body, if they ever do, it'll look like a tragic accident. A grieving widow who wandered too far into the wilderness and got lost." Elena felt her heart racing as the full horror of Marco's plan became clear. He wasn't just abandoning her in the wilderness. He was counting on the animals to finish what he had started. The insurance money would all be his, and no one would ever suspect that Carlos's trusted friend had committed murder for financial gain. The sound of howling in the distance made both of them freeze on the trail. It was still daylight, but the wolves of Whispering Pines Reserve were known to be active during all hours, especially when winter was approaching, and they needed to hunt more frequently to build up their strength. Elena had heard stories about the wolf packs that roamed these mountains, led by an alpha male that the local Cherokee called the Shadow Walker. "Perfect," Marco muttered, pulling Elena forward with renewed urgency. "Sounds like dinner is being served early tonight." They climbed for another hour, Elena's strength fading with each step. Her pregnancy had been difficult from the beginning, complicated by stress and grief over Carlos's death. The baby seemed to sense her distress, kicking and moving constantly as if trying to tell her to fight back. But what could she do against a man twice her size in the middle of nowhere? The trail finally opened into a small clearing surrounded by massive boulders and fallen logs. In the center stood the entrance to what appeared to be a natural cave, its opening dark and forbidding. Fresh scratches on the nearby trees and the strong scent of musk told Elena everything she needed to know. This was a wolf den, and Marco had brought her directly to it. "This is where we part ways, sister-in-law," Marco said, shoving Elena toward the cave entrance. "Try not to scream too loud when they find you. I'd hate for the rangers to come looking too quickly." Elena stumbled and fell to her knees at the mouth of the cave, her hands scraping against the rocky ground. Behind her, she could hear Marco's footsteps already heading back down the trail, leaving her alone in a place where few humans had ever ventured and even fewer had survived. The silence that followed his departure was overwhelming. Elena had never experienced such complete isolation, surrounded by wilderness that seemed to pulse with unseen life. Every shadow could hide a predator, every sound could signal approaching danger. She pulled herself to her feet and looked around the clearing, trying to understand her options. The cave behind her was clearly occupied. She could smell the musky scent of wolves and see paw prints in the soft earth near the entrance. Going inside would be suicide. But staying in the open clearing would make her an easy target for any predator that happened to wander through the area. As if summoned by her thoughts, the sound of howling rose again from the forest around her. This time it was closer, much closer. Elena could hear multiple voices joining the chorus, creating a harmony that was both beautiful and terrifying. The pack was communicating, and she suspected they were talking about the unexpected visitor who had appeared in their territory. Elena's water broke just as the first wolf emerged from the tree line. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The massive gray animal stepped into the clearing with the confidence of a creature that had never known fear. Its yellow eyes fixed on Elena with intelligence that seemed almost human, studying her with an intensity that made her breath catch in her throat. This was no ordinary wolf. Even in her terrified state, Elena could see that this animal carried itself like royalty, like a king surveying his domain. More wolves began appearing from the shadows, their forms materializing from the forest like ghosts. Elena counted at least 8 adults, all of them focused on her with varying degrees of curiosity and caution. But it was the massive gray wolf that held her attention. Something about the way it moved, the way it tilted its head to study her, reminded her of the Cherokee legends Carlos used to tell about shapeshifters and spirit animals. Labor pains began hitting Elena in waves, each one stronger than the last. She sank to her knees again, this time from physical necessity rather than fear. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The gray wolf stepped closer, its massive head tilted in what almost looked like concern. Elena found herself looking directly into its eyes, seeing something there that defied explanation. This wasn't the cold predatory stare she had expected. Instead, she saw what looked almost like compassion, as if the animal understood her situation and was trying to decide what to do about it. "Please," Elena whispered, not sure why she was talking to a wild animal, but unable to stop herself. "I know you probably don't understand, but I'm having a baby. I don't want to die out here, and I don't want my child to die either." The wolf's ears perked up at the sound of her voice, and Elena could have sworn she saw understanding flicker in its yellow eyes. It took another step closer, now close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from its massive body. Up close, she could see that this animal was even larger than she had initially thought, probably weighing close to 150 pounds. Another contraction hit Elena, stronger than any of the previous ones. She cried out despite her intention to stay quiet, the pain overwhelming her ability to maintain control. The sound echoed off the rocks around the clearing, and she saw several of the other wolves shift nervously at the noise. But the gray wolf didn't move away. Instead, it lay down next to her, positioning its body between Elena and the rest of the pack, The message was clear even across species barriers. This human was under the protection of the Alpha, and any wolf that wanted to challenge that decision would have to go through him first. Elena stared at the massive animal lying beside her, unable to believe what was happening. In all the stories Carlos had told her about the Cherokee legends, she had never heard of anything like this. Wolves were supposed to be dangerous, unpredictable predators that attacked anything they perceived as weak or threatening. They weren't supposed to offer protection to pregnant humans who stumbled into their territory. The labor pains were coming faster now, and Elena knew she was running out of time. The baby was going to be born in this clearing, whether she liked it or not, surrounded by wolves and miles from any medical help. She tried to remember everything she had learned in her prenatal classes, but none of those lessons had covered giving birth in the wilderness with a wolf pack as midwives. "I don't know if you can understand me," Elena said to the gray wolf, her voice strained with pain and effort. "But if something happens to me, please don't hurt my baby. I know that's probably too much to ask, but Carlos always said that wolves were noble creatures who protected their own." The wolf turned its massive head to look at her directly, and Elena felt her breath catch as those yellow eyes seemed to bore into her soul. For just a moment, she could have sworn she saw something human looking back at her, as if there was more to this animal than simple wolf instincts and pack behavior. Another contraction hit her, this one so strong that Elena couldn't help but scream. The sound echoed through the clearing and was immediately answered by howls from the surrounding forest. More wolves were coming, drawn by the commotion in their territory. Elena closed her eyes and tried to prepare herself for whatever was about to happen. But when she opened her eyes again, she saw something that made her question her own sanity. The gray wolf was gone, and in its place stood a man. He was tall and lean with long black hair that fell past his shoulders and skin the color of burnished copper. Traditional Cherokee tattoos decorated his arms and chest, and he wore clothing that seemed to be made from wolf fur and leather. But it was his eyes that convinced Elena she wasn't hallucinating from the pain. They were the same yellow eyes that had been studying her moments before, impossible as that seemed. "My name is Diego," the man said, his voice carrying the same quiet authority that the wolf had displayed. "I am the one the Cherokee calls Shadow Walker, leader of the wolves in these mountains. You are in labor, and you need help." Elena stared at him, her mind struggling to process what she was seeing. Shapeshifters were supposed to be legends, stories that grandparents told to entertain children around campfires. They weren't supposed to be real, and they certainly weren't supposed to appear in wolf dens, just when desperate pregnant women needed them most. "This isn't possible," Elena gasped between contractions. "You were a wolf. I saw you transform." Diego knelt beside her with fluid grace, his movements carrying the same predatory elegance she had observed in his wolf form. "Many things are possible that your people have forgotten how to see. Right now, what matters is bringing your child safely into this world." Another wave of pain hit Elena, and she felt the overwhelming urge to push. The baby was coming whether she was ready or not, and there was no stopping the process now. Diego seemed to understand immediately, positioning himself to help with a competence that suggested he had experience with childbirth. "The contractions are very close together," Diego observed, his hands surprisingly gentle as he examined her situation. "Your baby is eager to join us. Can you tell me your name?" "Elena," she managed to say between pants. "Elena Vasquez. My husband Carlos died 3 months ago in a logging accident." Diego's expression darkened slightly at this information. "You are the widow from Cedar Falls Township. I heard about your husband's death from the Cherokee elders." Carlos Vasquez was known as an honest man who respected the forest and its creatures. Elena felt tears streaming down her face, partly from the physical pain but mostly from the emotional relief of meeting someone who had known and respected her husband. "His brother Marco brought me here to die. He wants the insurance money, and he thinks if the wolves kill me and the baby, he'll inherit everything. The howling around the clearing grew louder, and Elena could see more wolves emerging from the forest. But instead of the threat she had expected, these animals seemed to be forming a protective circle around the den area. Diego spoke to them in a language that sounded like a mixture of Cherokee words and wolf vocalizations, and Elena watched in amazement as the pack responded like a well-trained security team. Marco Vasquez made a serious mistake bringing you to my territory, Diego said, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. But his mistake is your fortune. You and your child are now under the protection of the Shadow Walker pack, and no harm will come to you while you are in our care. Another contraction hit Elena with overwhelming force, and she felt the baby's head beginning to crown. Diego's hands were steady and sure as he helped guide the process, speaking words of encouragement in both English and Cherokee. Around them, the wolves had settled into a watchful circle, their presence somehow comforting rather than threatening. I can see the baby's head, Diego announced, his voice filled with excitement. One more strong push should do it. Elena gathered all her remaining strength and pushed with everything she had. She felt the baby slip free from her body in a rush of fluid and relief, followed immediately by the sound she had been praying to hear. Her child's first cry echoed through the clearing, strong and healthy and absolutely perfect. It's a girl, Diego said, carefully lifting the tiny infant and wrapping her in his leather jacket. A beautiful, healthy girl with strong lungs and fighting spirit. But even as Elena reached for her daughter, she felt another wave of contractions beginning. Diego's eyes widened as he realized what was happening. There's another baby, he announced with wonder. Twins, the second one is coming now. Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. All of her prenatal appointments had indicated a single baby. How was it possible that she was carrying twins without anyone knowing? But there was no time to worry about medical mysteries. The second baby was determined to make its entrance into the world just as dramatically as the first. Diego handed the first baby to one of the female wolves, who took the infant with incredible gentleness and began cleaning her with maternal instincts that transcended species. Elena watched in amazement as the wolf treated her daughter with the same care. It would show its own cubs. The second baby arrived just as the sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the clearing in shades of gold and crimson. This time it was a boy, slightly smaller than his sister, but with the same strong voice and determined spirit. Diego wrapped him carefully and placed both babies in Elena's arms, where they immediately settled against her warmth with contented sighs. Sacred twins, Diego said with reverence, looking at the babies with an expression of awe. Born in the wolf den during the time of the Shadow Walker. This is something the Cherokee prophecies spoke of long ago. Elena looked down at her children, her heart overflowing with love and relief. After hours of terror and pain, she was holding her babies safe in her arms. They were beautiful and perfect, with Carlos's dark hair and her own green eyes. But more than that, they seemed somehow different from ordinary babies. There was an alertness in their expressions, an awareness that seemed beyond their age. What prophecies? Elena asked, though she was almost afraid to hear the answer. Diego settled beside her, his wolf pack forming a protective circle around the small family. The Cherokee elders speak of children who would be born to bridge the gap between the human world and the spirit world of the animals. Sacred twins who would carry the gifts of both species and help heal the wounds between two peoples who have forgotten how to communicate. As if in response to his words, both babies turned their heads toward the surrounding wolves, their eyes tracking the movements of the pack with interest rather than fear. One of the younger wolves crept closer and gently nuzzled the little girl's hand, earning a delighted gurgle that sounded almost like a wolf pup's greeting call. They understand, Diego said with wonder. Already they can sense the wolf spirits around them. These children are special, Elena. They will grow up to do great things. Elena felt a surge of maternal protection mixed with worry. If her children truly were special in the way Diego suggested, what kind of life awaited them? Would they ever be able to live normally, or would they always be caught between two worlds? But looking at the peaceful scene around her, with wolves and babies coexisting in perfect harmony, Elena began to think that maybe normal wasn't what her family was meant for. Maybe Carlos had died for a reason, leading her to this place where her children could discover their true destiny. What happens now? Elena asked, exhaustion finally beginning to overtake her adrenaline. Diego smiled, and for a moment she could see both the man and the wolf in his expression. Now you rest and recover your strength. Tomorrow we begin teaching your children what it means to be part of both worlds. The Shadow Walker pack will raise them alongside the wolf cubs, and they will learn the old ways that your people have forgotten. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky above the clearing, Elena held her sacred twins close and listened to the gentle sounds of the wolf pack settling in for the night. Marco had brought her here to die, but instead she had found a new family and a new purpose. Her children would grow up learning the ancient wisdom of the Cherokee and the wild freedom of the wolves. The prophecy Diego had mentioned was beginning to unfold, and Elena suspected that their story was just getting started. The morning sun filtered through the pine canopy above the wolf den, casting dancing shadows across the clearing where Elena had given birth to her sacred twins just 12 hours earlier. She woke slowly, her body aching from the ordeal, but her heart filled with a warmth she had not felt since Carlos's death. The babies were nestled against her chest, breathing peacefully while surrounded by the protective circle of Diego's pack. Elena's eyes searched the clearing until she found Diego sitting near the entrance to the cave, his human form silhouetted against the early morning light. He was speaking quietly in Cherokee to an elderly woman who had appeared sometime during the night. The woman's silver hair was braided with feathers and small bones, and her weathered face held the wisdom of someone who had seen many seasons pass in these mountains. The grandmother Sofia has come to examine the children, Diego explained. When he noticed Elena was awake, she is the keeper of the old prophecies and will be able to tell us more about what we witnessed last night. Sofia approached with the careful movements of someone whose age had not diminished her authority. Her dark eyes studied Elena with curiosity rather than judgment, and when she spoke, her voice carried the musical quality of someone who had spent decades chanting sacred songs. The spirits told me I would find something remarkable in the wolf den today, Sofia said, kneeling beside Elena with surprising grace. But I did not expect to discover the fulfillment of our most ancient prophecy. May I examine your children? Elena hesitated for only a moment before carefully lifting her daughter and placing her in Sofia's experienced hands. The baby girl opened her eyes and looked directly at the Cherokee elder with an alertness that seemed beyond her few hours of life. Sofia gasped softly and spoke several words in Cherokee that Diego translated as expressions of wonder and reverence. This child carries the mark of the spirit wolf, Sofia announced, gently touching a small birthmark on the baby's shoulder that Elena had not noticed before. The mark was shaped like a crescent moon surrounded by what looked like wolf paw prints. And her brother will have the same marking. They are the twin guardians spoken of in our oldest stories. Elena felt a mixture of pride and concern as she watched Sofia examine her son, who indeed bore an identical birthmark in the same location. The elderly woman's excitement was obvious, but Elena could not shake the feeling that being part of an ancient prophecy might bring dangers she was not prepared to face. What exactly does the prophecy say? Elena asked, accepting her son back from Sofia's gentle hands. Diego and Sofia exchanged meaningful looks before the elder began speaking, in a voice that carried the rhythmic cadence of oral tradition passed down through generations. Long ago, when the Cherokee people first came to these mountains, we lived in harmony with all the creatures of the forest. The wolves were our brothers, and we shared the hunt and the protection of our territories. But as the white settlers arrived and pushed our people from our ancestral lands, that connection was broken. The wolves retreated deeper into the wilderness, and our people forgot the old ways of speaking with the animal spirits. Sophia paused to stroke the baby girl's tiny hand, marveling at how the infant seemed to listen intently to every word. The prophecy speaks of a time when sacred twins would be born in the wolf den, children who would carry the blood of both peoples and the spirit of the wolf pack. These twins would have the power to restore the ancient connections and heal the wounds between the human world and the natural world. They would be raised by the Shadow Walker and learn the languages of both species. Elena looked down at her children, trying to imagine them growing up with such an enormous responsibility. And you believe Maya and Alex are these prophesied children? Maya and Alex? Diego asked with surprise. You have chosen their names already? Elena nodded, feeling a sense of certainty about the names that she could not explain. Maya means illusion in Sanskrit, but also represents the divine feminine energy that creates and sustains the universe. Alex means defender of mankind. The names came to me during the night, as if someone was whispering them in my dreams. Sophia and Diego exchanged another significant look, and Elena could see that her choice of names held meaning beyond what she understood. Maya was the name of the first female shaman who could speak with the wolves, Sophia explained with growing excitement. And Alex was her twin brother, the warrior who protected the sacred connection between our peoples. You have given your children the names of the original twin guardians from our creation stories. The implications of this revelation settled over Elena like a weight she was not sure she could carry. Her children were not just special babies born under unusual circumstances. According to Cherokee prophecy, they were the reincarnation of legendary figures who were destined to restore an ancient harmony that had been lost for generations. As if sensing her mother's emotional turmoil, baby Maya began to fuss, her tiny cries echoing through the clearing. Immediately, 3 of the female wolves approached with concern, their maternal instincts activated by the sound of distress. Elena watched in amazement as the largest female, a beautiful gray and white wolf that Diego called Luna, gently nuzzled the baby until her crying stopped. The pack has already accepted them as their own, Diego observed with satisfaction. Luna lost her own cubs earlier this spring to a rival pack. She has been mourning their loss for months, but your children are awakening her maternal instincts. Again, Elena carefully placed Maya on a soft bed of pine needles and moss that the wolves had somehow arranged during the night. Luna immediately lay down beside the baby, her warm body providing comfort and protection. When Elena placed Alex next to his sister, 2 more wolves took up positions around the twins, creating a living barrier against any potential threats. This is extraordinary, Sophia whispered, pulling out a small leather journal and beginning to make notes with a pencil worn smooth by years of use. I have never seen wolves accept human children so completely. It is as if they recognize the ancient bond that these babies represent. Diego knelt beside the makeshift nest and began speaking to the wolves in a combination of Cherokee words and sounds that Elena gradually realized were wolf vocalizations. The pack responded with soft whines and gentle rumbles that seemed to indicate agreement and understanding. It was clear that some form of complex communication was taking place, but Elena could not begin to guess what was being discussed. I have told them that Maya and Alex will be raised as members of the pack, Diego explained when the conversation ended. They will learn to hunt and run with the wolves while also learning the human skills they will need to bridge both worlds. Luna and her sisters have agreed to serve as foster mothers, sharing the responsibility with you. Elena felt a surge of gratitude mixed with apprehension. The idea of wolves helping to raise her children was both wonderful and terrifying. How can I be sure they will be safe? I mean, I trust you, but these are still wild animals with natural predators and instincts. Sophia reached over and took Elena's hand with surprising gentleness. The wolves of this pack are not ordinary animals, child. They are the descendants of the original spirit wolves who made the sacred pact with our people centuries ago. Diego carries the bloodline of the first Shadow Walker, and his pack has been waiting for the prophesied children for 7 generations. As if to demonstrate the truth of Sophia's words, Diego began to shimmer and blur around the edges. Elena watched in fascination as his human form gradually dissolved and reformed into the massive gray wolf she had first encountered in the clearing. But this time, the transformation seemed natural and beautiful rather than shocking. The wolf. Diego approached the babies and gently touched each of them with his nose, a gesture that seemed to carry ceremonial significance. When he returned to human form, Diego's eyes held a warmth that spoke of deep emotional connection. "The pack bond has been established," he announced. "Maya and Alex are now considered cubs of the Shadow Walker pack. Any wolf in these mountains will protect them with their life, and they will grow up learning the wisdom of both species." Elena spent the next several hours watching in wonder as the wolves interacted with her children. Luna proved to be incredibly gentle, using her tongue to clean the babies with the same care she would show her own offspring. The other females took turns standing guard while Elena rested, their alert expressions scanning the forest for any sign of danger. But it was the male wolves that surprised Elena the most. She had expected them to be indifferent or even hostile to the human babies, but instead they seemed fascinated by Maya and Alex. The younger males would approach carefully and sniff the babies with obvious curiosity, while the older wolves maintained a respectful distance, but watched the twins with what looked like protective interest. "The entire pack structure is reorganizing itself around your children," Sophia observed, making more notes in her journal. "This is unprecedented behavior. It is as if they recognize the babies as future leaders of the pack, even though they are still human infants." Elena noticed that the wolves seemed to respond differently to each twin. Maya attracted the attention of the females, who gathered around her with nurturing energy and soft whines of affection. Alex, on the other hand, drew the interest of the males, who watched him with expressions that seemed to indicate they were evaluating his potential as a future alpha. "Will they be able to transform like you do?" Elena asked Diego, voicing a question that had been troubling her since the previous night. Diego considered the question carefully before responding. "The gift of shape-shifting is rare, even among the Cherokee. It requires a perfect balance of human intelligence and wolf instinct, combined with a spiritual connection to the animal world that few people can achieve. Whether Maya and Alex will develop this ability depends on how successfully they can integrate both aspects of their heritage." Sophia nodded in agreement. The prophecy speaks of the twin guardians having powers that surpass even the Shadow Walker. But it also warns that such gifts come with great responsibility and significant danger. There will be those who fear what your children represent and will try to prevent them from fulfilling their destiny. As if summoned by her words, the sound of distant engines echoed through the forest. Diego's head snapped up with alarm, his enhanced hearing detecting the approach of vehicles long before Elena could hear anything. The wolves around the clearing immediately went on high alert, their bodies tense and ready for action. "Multiple vehicles approaching from the eastern trail," Diego announced, his voice carrying the authority of a military commander. "Armed men, moving with purpose rather than caution. This is not a search and rescue operation." Elena felt fear grip her heart as she realized what this probably meant. "Marco, he must have brought help to make sure I'm really dead." Sophia began gathering herbs and small leather pouches from a bag Elena had not noticed before. "The babies are too young to be moved far, and Elena needs time to recover from giving birth. We must make our stand here and protect the sacred children at all costs." Diego was already transforming back into his wolf form, his body language radiating deadly intent. Around the clearing, the other wolves began positioning themselves for what was clearly going to be a confrontation. Elena watched in amazement. As they moved with the precision of a trained military unit, each animal taking up a specific position that would provide optimal defensive coverage. "I can't let you risk your lives for us," Elena protested, trying to struggle to her feet despite her exhaustion. "Marco is my problem. I should face him myself." Luna growled softly and moved closer to Elena, gently but firmly pushing her back down onto the bed of pine needles. The message was clear, even across species barriers. Elena was now part of the pack, and the pack protected its own regardless of individual preferences. Sophia placed a weathered hand on Elena's shoulder. "This confrontation was inevitable from the moment your children were born. Marco represents the kind of greed and violence that has always threatened the sacred connections between peoples. The twin guardians cannot fulfill their destiny if they are destroyed before they have a chance to grow and learn." The sound of engines was getting louder, and Elena could now hear multiple vehicles making their way up the mountain trail. From the noise level, she estimated that Marco had brought at least 3 or 4 companions, probably armed and expecting to find her body being consumed by wild animals. Diego approached in his wolf form and gently touched Elena's hand with his nose. When their eyes met, she saw intelligence and determination that transcended the normal boundaries between human and animal consciousness. Without words, he was communicating that everything would be all right, that the pack would defend the sacred twins no matter what the cost. The first gunshot echoed through the forest just as the vehicles came into view through the trees. Elena clutched her babies closer, her maternal instincts overwhelming her fear. Whatever happened next, she was determined that Maya and Alex would survive to fulfill the prophecy that had brought them into the world under such extraordinary circumstances. Marco's voice carried across the clearing, filled with frustration and anger. "I know you're out here somewhere, Elena. The tire tracks lead right to this area. You might as well come out and make this easy on everyone." Sophia whispered a prayer in Cherokee and began sprinkling what looked like blessed herbs around the babies. "The sacred circle is complete," she announced quietly. "Whatever happens, the twin guardians are protected by the ancient magic of both peoples." Elena looked around at the wolves positioned throughout the clearing, their yellow eyes gleaming with predatory focus. Diego stood at the entrance to the den, his massive form radiating authority and barely contained violence. Luna and the other females had formed a protective circle around the babies, their maternal instincts transformed into deadly determination. The confrontation that was about to unfold would determine not just the fate of Elena and her children, but the future of the prophecy that had been waiting centuries for fulfillment. The sacred twins had been born, the pack bond had been established, and the ancient magic was awakening after generations of dormancy. Marco had come to the mountains expecting to commit a simple murder for financial gain. Instead, he was about to face the combined fury of forces he could never have imagined, powers that had been sleeping in the Blue Ridge Mountains since the Cherokee people first learned to speak with the spirit wolves. The second phase of the prophecy was about to begin, and Elena suspected that by the time the sun set again over Whispering Pines Reserve, everything would be different. The sacred twins would either be protected and allowed to grow into their destiny, or the ancient magic would die with them in this remote clearing where few humans had ever ventured. The sound of approaching footsteps told Elena that the choice was no longer hers to make. Marco and his companions were getting closer, and the wolves were preparing to defend the den with their lives. The prophecy would be fulfilled or destroyed in the next few minutes, and Elena could only hold her children close and trust in the ancient powers that had brought them all together in this sacred place. Diego's howl shattered the afternoon silence, a sound so primal and powerful that it seemed to shake the very mountains. It was answered immediately by every wolf in the pack, creating a chorus that spoke of unity, determination, and the awakening of magic that had slept for far too long. The twin guardians had been born, and the Shadow Walker pack was ready to defend them against any threat. The real test of the prophecy was about to begin. The gunshots echoed through whispering pines, reserve like thunder, shattering the peaceful morning and sending birds fleeing from the ancient pines in panicked clouds. Marco's voice carried across the clearing with predatory confidence as he called out to companions Elena could not yet see through the dense forest. "Spread out and search every cave, every fallen log, every place something could hide," Marco commanded, his words dripping with malicious intent. "She's wounded and probably dead already, but I want to see the body with my own eyes. And if those wolves got to her first, we need proof for the insurance investigators." Elena pressed herself deeper into the wolf den, clutching Maya and Alex against her chest while trying to control her racing heartbeat. The babies seemed to sense the danger, remaining unusually quiet as if their infant instincts understood the need for silence. Around the clearing, Diego's pack had melted into the shadows with supernatural stealth, positioning themselves for an ambush that would catch the intruders completely off guard. Sophia crouched beside Elena, her weathered hands moving in complex patterns while she whispered prayers in Cherokee. The elderly woman's voice carried the weight of centuries of tradition as she called upon the ancient spirits to protect the sacred twins. Elena could feel something changing in the air around them, a subtle shift in energy that made her skin tingle with electricity. "The spirits of our ancestors are awakening," Sophia whispered, her dark eyes reflecting a power that transcended her physical age. "They have been waiting for this moment since the first Cherokee learned to speak with the wolf spirits. Your children are the bridge between worlds, and the old magic will not let them be destroyed." Through the cave entrance, Elena could see Marco emerged from the tree line with 3 other men, all of them carrying hunting rifles and moving with the careful precision of experienced hunters. She recognized one of them as Jake Morrison, a local guide who took tourists on wilderness expeditions and had a reputation for being willing to bend the law for the right price. The third man was someone Elena had never seen before, but his expensive clothing and confident bearing suggested he was not from the local area. His pale skin and soft features marked him as someone who spent most of his time in cities rather than mountain wilderness. Yet he carried his weapon with the familiarity of someone who knew how to use it. "This is Dr. Richard Kane," Marco explained to his companions as they advanced toward the clearing. "He represents certain interests that have been tracking unusual activity in this area for several months. Apparently, there have been reports of animals behaving in ways that suggest they might be under some form of external control." Elena felt her blood turn to ice as she realized that Marco's plan went beyond simple murder for insurance money. Somehow, these people knew about Diego and the supernatural aspects of the wolf pack. They were not just here to kill her and the babies. They were here to capture or destroy the ancient magic that protected this sacred place. Dr. Kane raised a device that looked like a sophisticated radio scanner, sweeping it back and forth while studying readings on a small screen. "The electromagnetic signatures are definitely stronger in this area," he announced with scientific excitement. "Whatever is causing the anomalous animal behavior is centered somewhere very close to this location." Jake Morrison shifted nervously, his weathered face showing the unease of someone who had spent enough time in the wilderness to recognize when natural order was being disrupted. "I still think this is a bad idea, Marco. These wolves aren't acting normal. They're too organized, too intelligent. It's like they're planning something." Marco's laugh was bitter and dismissive. "They're just animals, Jake. Dangerous animals that are going to help us cover up a tragic accident. Dr. Kane here is going to make sure we understand exactly what's making them so aggressive, and then we're going to eliminate the problem permanently." Elena watched in growing horror as Dr. Kane pulled additional equipment from a large backpack. She could see what appeared to be some kind of tranquilizer gun, several electronic devices that she did not recognize, and a collection of metal, cages that were clearly designed for capturing live animals. The reports suggest that one alpha wolf in particular is exhibiting intelligence levels far beyond normal canine capabilities. Dr. Kane explained while assembling his equipment. If we can capture this specimen alive, my employers will pay very well for the opportunity to study how such enhanced intelligence might be replicated or controlled. Sophia's whispered prayers grew more urgent as she realized the full scope of the threat facing Diego and his pack. These men were not just looking to kill Elena and cover up Marco's crime. They represented forces that wanted to capture and exploit the sacred connection between the Cherokee people and the spirit wolves. The Shadow Walker bloodline has been protected for 7 generations, Sophia whispered with fierce determination. I will not let corporate greed destroy what our ancestors died to preserve. Diego appeared at the mouth of the cave in his human form, moving with such silence that even Elena was startled by his sudden presence. His face was painted with traditional Cherokee war markings, and his eyes held the cold fury of someone whose family had been threatened by enemies who did not understand the forces they were challenging. Take the babies deeper into the cave, Diego commanded quietly. There are tunnels that lead to safety, but someone must guide you through the passages. Sophia knows the way. Elena started to protest, but Diego's expression stopped her words before they could form. This was no longer about her personal safety or even the survival of her children. The confrontation about to unfold would determine whether the ancient prophecy could be fulfilled, or whether centuries of sacred tradition would be destroyed by modern greed and ignorance. What about you? Elena whispered, unable to hide her concern for the man who had saved her life and helped bring her children into the world. Diego's smile carried both warmth and deadly promise. I am the Shadow Walker, defender of the sacred pack. These men have brought weapons and cages to my territory, intending to capture my family and exploit our gifts. They will learn why the Cherokee never hunted wolves in these mountains. Sophia gathered the babies into a carrier woven from pine branches and soft moss, her movements quick and efficient despite her advanced age. The deep caves connect to an ancient Cherokee refuge that has been hidden for over 200 years, she explained to Elena. Your children will be safe there, while Diego and the pack deal with these intruders. Elena reluctantly allowed Sophia to take Maya and Alex, her maternal instincts screaming against leaving her babies, even for a moment, but she could see the wisdom in Diego's plan. The twins were too vulnerable to be exposed to whatever violence was about to erupt in the clearing outside. I want to help, Elena said with determination that surprised even herself. These people are here because of me. Marco is my responsibility, and I should face him myself. Diego studied her with respect that had been absent during their first meeting. You have courage worthy of a Cherokee warrior, but your children need their mother alive. The greatest help you can give us is to keep Maya and Alex safe while we protect the sacred bonds that will allow them to fulfill their destiny. The sound of approaching footsteps grew louder as Marco's group advanced toward the cave entrance. Elena could hear them discussing strategy, their voices carrying the confidence of hunters who believed they held every advantage. They had no idea that they were walking into territory defended by forces that existed beyond their understanding. Sophia led Elena deeper into the cave system through passages that seemed to have been carved from the living rock by centuries of flowing water. Ancient Cherokee symbols were painted on the walls, their meanings lost to all but the most traditional keepers of the old knowledge. Elena could feel the weight of history pressing down around them as they moved through spaces that had sheltered her children's spiritual ancestors for countless generations. The babies remained remarkably calm during the journey, their small hands reaching out to touch the painted symbols as if they recognized something familiar in the ancient artwork. Elena marveled at their apparent connection to this sacred place, wondering what other abilities they might develop as they grew older. Behind them, the sound of conflict erupted with sudden violence. Diego's howl echoed through the cave system, a sound so primal and powerful that it seemed to shake dust from the ancient stone walls. It was answered immediately by the voices of his pack, creating a harmony that spoke of unity forged through generations of shared purpose. The Shadow Walker calls upon the spirits of all wolves who have defended this territory, Sophia explained as they hurried through the winding passages. Your children are witnessing the awakening of magic that has slept since the first white settlers drove our people from their ancestral homes. Elena could hear the sharp crack of gunfire mixing with sounds that defied easy description. Howls and growls echoed through the cave system, but there were also noises that seemed almost supernatural in nature. The very air around them seemed to vibrate with energy, as if the mountain itself was awakening to defend its sacred inhabitants. Will Diego be safe? Elena asked, her voice tight with worry for the man who had risked everything to protect her family. Sophia's expression was grim but determined. The Shadow Walker has faced many threats over the years, but never anything like this. These men bring modern weapons and scientific knowledge that could be used to trap or control the pack. But they also face powers they cannot comprehend or prepare for. The passage opened into a vast underground chamber that took Elena's breath away. Ancient Cherokee artwork covered every surface, depicting the history of the relationship between the tribe and the wolf spirits. In the center of the chamber, a natural spring bubbled up from deep within the earth, its clear water reflecting the soft light that filtered down from hidden openings in the cave ceiling. This is the heart of the mountain, Sophia announced with reverence. The most sacred place of our people, where the first Cherokee shamans learned to speak with the animal spirits. Your children are the first humans to enter this chamber in Korean. Over 100 years. Elena looked around in wonder at the incredible artwork that surrounded them. The paintings seemed to tell a story that spanned centuries, showing Cherokee warriors fighting alongside wolves, shamans transforming into animal spirits, and children being raised by pack families in perfect harmony. At the center of it all was a repeated image of twins, a boy and a girl marked with crescent moon birthmarks, leading both humans and wolves toward some kind of golden future. The prophecy, Elena whispered, recognizing the artistic depiction of her own children's destiny. Sophia nodded with satisfaction. Every generation of Cherokee has added to these paintings, keeping the story alive even when our people were forced to abandon their traditional ways. The artists who created these images were seers who could glimpse possible futures, and they all saw the same vision of the twin guardians who would restore the ancient connections. Maya and Alex seemed fascinated by the painted walls, their infant eyes tracking the flowing lines and symbolic figures with attention that seemed beyond their age. Elena watched in amazement as the babies reached toward specific images, their small hands moving as if they were trying to touch ancestors they somehow recognized. The sound of combat above them was growing more intense, with periods of gunfire followed by eerie silence that was somehow more frightening than the obvious violence. Elena found herself straining to hear Diego's voice among the chaos, needing some sign that he was still alive and fighting. The Shadow Walker draws power from this sacred place, Sophia explained, sensing Elena's anxiety. As long as he remains connected to the heart of the mountain, the ancient magic will protect him. But the men above have weapons and knowledge that could disrupt that connection if they understood what they were really fighting. Elena looked down at her children, marveling at their peaceful expressions despite the violence raging overhead. They seemed completely unafraid, as if they trusted in protections that existed beyond physical weapons or human strategies. There, small hands continued to reach toward the painted walls, and Elena could have sworn she saw the ancient artwork shimmer slightly in response to their touch. Are they already developing their abilities? Elena asked, noting the way the babies seemed to interact with their environment in ways that went beyond normal infant behavior. Sophia studied the twins with wonder and growing excitement. The connection to the sacred place is awakening their inherited gifts earlier than anyone expected. They are drawing strength from the same source that empowers Diego and his pack. Even as infants, they are already fulfilling their role as bridges between the human and spirit worlds. A tremendous roar echoed down from the cave entrance, followed by what sounded like multiple trees falling simultaneously. Elena could hear men shouting in panic and confusion, their confident voices replaced by fear and desperation. Whatever was happening above them, it was clear that Marco's plan was not proceeding as he had expected. "The ancient guardians are awakening," Sophia said with grim satisfaction. "The mountain spirits have been dormant for decades, but the birth of the twin guardians has stirred powers that these intruders never imagined they would face." Elena felt the ground beneath them trembling slightly, as if massive forces were moving through the stone foundations of the mountain itself. The water in the sacred spring began to glow with a soft light that had no visible source, and the painted figures on the walls seemed to shift and move in her peripheral vision. "What's happening?" Elena whispered, clutching her babies closer as the supernatural activity intensified around them. Sophia raised her arms and began chanting in Cherokee, her voice echoing off the ancient walls as she called upon spirits that had protected her people for countless generations. The heart of the mountain is responding to the presence of the twin guardians. All the magic that has been sleeping in this sacred place is awakening to defend the children who will fulfill the prophecy. Above them, the sounds of combat were reaching a crescendo that spoke of forces clashing on levels beyond mere physical confrontation. Elena could hear Diego's howl rising above everything else, but now it was joined by voices that seemed to come from the earth itself. The very mountain was joining the battle to protect the sacred twins and the ancient magic they represented. Dr. Kane's voice carried down through the cave system, high-pitched with panic and scientific disbelief. "This is impossible. The electromagnetic readings are off the charts. Something is interfering with all our equipment." Marco's response was barely audible over the supernatural chaos. "Just shoot everything that moves. We came here to eliminate problems, not study them." But Jake Morrison's terrified shouts suggested that the simple solution of violence was not going to be effective against the forces they had awakened. "The wolves are everywhere. They're moving like ghosts. And there's something else out there. Something that's not showing up on any of our sensors." Elena listened to the growing panic in the intruders' voices and felt a fierce satisfaction that surprised her with its intensity. These men had come to her sacred refuge intending to kill her children and capture Diego for scientific exploitation. Now they were facing the combined fury of forces they had never imagined existed. Sophia's chanting reached a crescendo that seemed to resonate through the very bones of the mountain. The glow from the sacred spring intensified, casting dancing shadows on the ancient artwork that made the painted figures appear to come alive. Elena could feel power flowing through the chamber, ancient magic awakening after generations of dormancy. "The twin guardians have come home," Sophia announced, with triumph in her voice. "The prophecy begins its fulfillment, and no force of greed or ignorance can stop what has been set in motion by the will of the spirits themselves." Maya and Alex began making soft sounds that seemed to harmonize with Sophia's chanting, their infant voices joining the ancient chorus despite their inability to speak or understand language. Elena watched in wonder as her children participated in ceremonies that connected them to traditions older than recorded history. The battle above them was reaching its conclusion, marked by a final tremendous roar that seemed to shake the entire mountain. Then silence fell over the cave system, broken only by the gentle bubbling of the sacred spring and the soft echoes of Sophia's prayers. Elena held her breath, waiting for some sign of what had happened to Diego and his pack. The supernatural forces that had been awakened were gradually settling back into dormancy, but the sense of power and protection remained strong in the sacred chamber. Footsteps echoed through the cave passages, moving with the confident stride of someone who belonged in this ancient place. Elena's heart leaped with relief as she recognized Diego's human form emerging from the tunnel entrance. His war paint streaked with sweat, but his eyes bright with victory. "It is finished," Diego announced with satisfaction. "The intruders have been dealt with, and the sacred territory is secure once again." Elena wanted to ask what had happened to Marco and his companions, but something in Diego's expression suggested that some questions were better left unasked. The important thing was that the threat had been eliminated, and the twin guardians were safe to continue their growth and development. "The mountain spirits fought alongside us," Diego continued, his voice filled with reverence for the forces that had aided in the battle. "The ancient magic is stronger than it has been in generations, awakened by the presence of your children and the fulfillment of the prophecy." Sophia gathered the babies back into her arms, her weathered face glowing with satisfaction and hope. "The first test has been passed. The twin guardians have been protected, and the sacred bonds have been strengthened. Now we can begin the true work of preparing them for their destiny." Elena looked around at the painted chamber that had become a refuge for her family, understanding that her old life was truly over and a new chapter was beginning. Her children would grow up in this sacred place, learning the ancient ways that would allow them to bridge the gap between two worlds. The prophecy had been protected, and the twin guardians were ready to begin their journey toward fulfilling a destiny that had been centuries in the making. The first major challenge had been overcome, but Elena suspected that greater tests lay ahead as Maya and Alex grew into their extraordinary gifts. 2 years had passed since Elena's children were born in the Wolf Den, and the Blue Ridge Mountains had become something far different from the wilderness preserve that maps and government records still claimed it to be. Maya and Alex had grown into remarkable toddlers whose abilities surpassed every prediction the Cherokee prophecies had described. Their connection to Diego's pack had evolved into something that challenged the very boundaries between human and animal consciousness. Elena watched from the entrance of their permanent shelter as Maya practiced what Sophia called the first speaking with a young wolf pup named Thunder. The little girl sat cross-legged in a circle of pine needles, her green eyes focused with intensity. Beyond her age as she communicated with the animal through sounds that seemed to bridge the gap between human language and wolf vocalizations. The pup responded with eager whines and playful movements that suggested genuine understanding rather than simple animal training. Alex stood nearby, his attention focused on a red-tailed hawk that had landed on a low branch just within his reach. Elena held her breath as her son slowly extended his hand toward the wild bird, speaking in the mixture of Cherokee and wolf sounds that had become his natural language. The hawk studied the toddler with intelligent black eyes before gently stepping onto his small arm, its talons careful not to pierce the child's tender skin. "The development is accelerating beyond anything our elders expected," Sophia observed, settling beside Elena with the careful movements of someone whose age was beginning to show despite her spiritual vitality. In the old stories, the twin guardians did not manifest their full abilities until they reached adolescence. Maya and Alex are demonstrating powers at 2 years old that should not appear for another decade. Diego emerged from the forest in his human form, his expression troubled in a way that Elena had learned to recognize as a sign of approaching danger. Over the past 2 years, he had become more than just the protector of her family. He had evolved into something approaching a father figure for the twins, teaching them the ancient ways while also serving as their connection to the wolf pack that had adopted them as cubs. "We have a problem," Diego announced without preamble, his voice carrying the tension of someone who had just received disturbing news. "Federal agents are establishing a research station at the base of the mountain. They claim to be studying unusual wildlife behavior, but their equipment and personnel suggest a much more serious investigation." Elena felt familiar fear grip her heart as she realized that the peaceful sanctuary they had built for the twins was about to be threatened once again. How long do we have before they reach this area? Sophia's weathered hands moved in the complex pattern she used when consulting the spirit world for guidance. Her dark eyes closed as she reached out with senses that transcended normal human perception, seeking information from sources that existed beyond the physical realm. The spirits speak of a great testing that will determine whether the prophecy can be fulfilled or whether the ancient magic must go into hiding for another generation, Sophia announced after several minutes of silent communion. The forces gathering at the base of the mountain represent more than government curiosity. They are connected to the same interests that sent Dr. Kane and his associates 2 years ago. Diego's expression darkened with protective fury. Corporate sponsors seeking to weaponize abilities they do not understand. They believe they can capture and replicate the gifts that have been passed down through 7 generations of Cherokee bloodlines. Elena looked at her children, marveling at how they continued their animal communication practice despite the adult conversation happening around them. Maya had convinced 3 Wolf pups to arrange themselves in a perfect circle, while Alex was now hosting an impromptu gathering of various forest birds who seemed drawn to his presence like moths to flame. "They're still so young," Elena said, with maternal concern overwhelming her voice. "How can we protect them from forces that have the resources of the federal government behind them?" Sophia opened her eyes and fixed Elena with a stare that carried the weight of centuries of tradition. "The time for hiding is ending, Elena. The prophecy speaks clearly about this moment. The twin guardians must face the ultimate test that will either establish them as the bridge between worlds or destroy the ancient magic forever." Diego knelt beside Maya and Alex, speaking to them in the gentle tones he reserved for the most important lessons. "Little ones, the spirits are calling us to show the outside world what the connection between peoples can accomplish. Are you ready to help the animal nations speak to the human nations?" Both children looked up at him with understanding that seemed far beyond their chronological age. Maya reached out and touched Diego's hand while making soft sounds that Elena recognized as Wolf language for agreement and loyalty. Alex chirped like a bird and then spoke his first clear English words in months. "Protect family, protect pack, protect mountain." Elena felt tears welling in her eyes as she realized that her children understood the gravity of the situation they were facing. Despite being only 2 years old, they grasped the importance of their role as bridges between human and animal consciousness. The prophecy had shaped them from birth, and they were ready to accept responsibilities that would challenge adults. "What exactly are we facing?" Elena asked, needing to understand the full scope of the threat that was approaching their sanctuary. Diego's expression became grim as he shared intelligence that his extended senses had gathered from throughout the mountain region. Military vehicles, scientific equipment, and personnel trained in capturing exotic animals. They are not here for observation or research. They are here for acquisition and control. Sophia nodded in agreement, her spiritual insights confirming Diego's physical observations. The corporate interests behind this operation believe they can create artificial versions of our sacred gifts through technology and scientific manipulation. They see Maya and Alex as specimens to be studied rather than people to be respected. Elena looked around at the peaceful clearing that had become home for her unusual family. Ancient Cherokee symbols were carved into nearby trees, marking this as sacred ground protected by traditions that predated European settlement by centuries. Wolf dens dotted the surrounding forest, housing the extended pack that had embraced her children as their own. It was a place where magic lived in harmony with nature, where impossible things happened daily, and where love transcended the boundaries between species. "We could run," Elena suggested, though she knew even as she spoke that flight was not a real option. "Take the children deeper into the wilderness where they could grow up safely." Diego shook his head with firm conviction. "The prophecy is clear about this moment. Elena, The twin guardians are meant to face this challenge and prove that the ancient connections can survive in the modern world. Running would only delay the confrontation while allowing our enemies to grow stronger and more prepared. Maya suddenly stood up from her communication circle with the wolf pups, her small face serious as she walked over to the adults with purpose beyond her years. She tugged on Sophia's traditional dress and spoke in perfect Cherokee, her pronunciation flawless despite her age. "The grandmother spirits say the test cannot be avoided," Sophia translated with amazement. "They also say that Maya and Alex carry more power than anyone realizes, including ourselves. The ultimate challenge will awaken abilities that have been dormant since birth." Alex approached his sister and took her hand, the two children standing together as they had in Elena's womb and in countless Cherokee prophecy paintings. When they touched, Elena could see a subtle shimmer in the air around them, as if their combined presence was affecting reality in ways that normal vision could barely perceive. "They're getting stronger," Elena observed with wonder mixed with concern. "Every day they seem more connected to forces that I can barely understand." Sophia's face glowed with grandmother's pride as she watched the twins demonstrate their growing abilities. The ancient magic recognizes them as its rightful inheritors. The mountain spirits, the animal nations, even the wind and the stones respond to their presence. They are becoming what the prophecy always said they would be. The sound of helicopter rotors echoed across the forest, still distant but growing steadily louder. Diego's enhanced hearing detected the approach long before Elena's human senses could register the threat. His body tensed with protective instincts. As he calculated time and distance, determining how long they had before the sanctuary would be invaded. "Multiple aircraft approaching from the south and east," Diego reported with military precision. "Heavy transport helicopters carrying equipment and personnel. They will establish a perimeter around this entire section of the mountain within the next 2 hours." Elena felt her maternal protective instincts surge as she realized that her children were about to face dangers that no parent should have to contemplate. "There has to be another way. They're just babies. How can we expose them to that kind of threat?" Sophia placed a weathered hand on Elena's shoulder with gentle firmness. "They are not just babies, child. They are the fulfillment of 7 generations of prophecy. The spirits have been preparing for this moment since the first Cherokee learned to speak with the wolf nations. Maya and Alex carry the combined wisdom of all their ancestors." Diego began moving through the clearing with focused purpose, collecting items that Elena recognized as ceremonial objects from Cherokee tradition. War paint, sacred herbs, and ceremonial weapons that had been passed down through generations of shadow walkers. His preparations showed the seriousness of someone who understood that the coming fight would decide the fate of everything they had worked to protect. "The pack leaders are gathering," Diego announced as wolf howls echoed throughout the forest. "Every alpha from here to the Tennessee border is answering the call. The animal nations understand that this battle will determine their future relationship with the human world." Elena watched in amazement as creatures began emerging from the forest to answer Diego's call. Wolves appeared first, dozens of them coming from the shadows with the quiet skill of trained warriors. But they were followed by other animals that Elena had never seen work together in such numbers. Bears walked into the clearing with massive dignity, while overhead the sky filled with birds of every species native to the Blue Ridge Mountains. "It looks like Noah's Ark," Elena whispered, staring at the incredible gathering of wildlife that was assembling around her. "Children." Sophia smiled with deep satisfaction as she watched the fulfillment of prophecy she had studied her entire life. The animal nations are keeping their ancient promise to stand with the twin guardians when the final test arrives. Every creature that calls these mountains home will fight to protect Maya and Alex. Maya and Alex seemed completely comfortable. Despite being surrounded by dozens of wild animals that would normally frighten human children, they moved through the gathering with confident familiarity, touching wolves and bears with casual affection, while birds landed on their shoulders and arms. Elena marveled at the complete trust that existed between her children and creatures that represented the top predators of the mountain ecosystem. "How are they doing this?" Elena asked, watching her son communicate with a massive black bear through gestures and sounds that seemed to form a real language. Diego paused in his ceremonial preparations to study the twins with professional interest. "They are not controlling the animals, Elena. They are communicating with them as equals. The creatures respond because Maya and Alex speak to them with respect and understanding rather than dominance or fear." The helicopter sounds were getting louder, and Elena could now see aircraft moving through the sky like mechanical birds of prey. Military precision was evident in their formation flying, and the size of the helicopters suggested they were capable of transporting significant numbers of personnel and large amounts of equipment. Federal agents and corporate security teams, Diego identified after studying the approaching aircraft with enhanced vision. But also scientists and technicians carrying equipment I do not recognize. They are prepared for encounters with both supernatural events and sophisticated resistance. Sophia began chanting in Cherokee, her voice rising to carry across the clearing and into the surrounding forest. Elena could feel power building in response to the elder's words, ancient magic awakening to face modern threats. The very air around them seemed to shimmer with energy as forces that had slept for generations stirred to consciousness. "The spirits of all Cherokee who ever walked these mountains are joining us," Sophia announced with reverence and determination. "The ancestors will not allow their prophecy to be destroyed by greed and ignorance." Elena felt the ground beneath her feet trembling slightly as supernatural forces gathered strength. The sacred spring that provided water for their settlement began glowing with the same soft light she had witnessed in the heart of the mountain 2 years earlier. Even the trees seemed to be responding to the spiritual awakening, their branches swaying in winds that touched nothing else. Maya and Alex positioned themselves in the center of the clearing, holding hands as they had learned to do when facing challenges that required their combined abilities. Elena watched with pride and terror as her 2-year-old children prepared to face threats that would challenge experienced adults. "We stay together," Elena declared with firm resolve. "Whatever happens, this family faces it as a unit." Diego nodded with respect for her courage. The prophecy speaks of the twin guardians being supported by their human mother and their Cherokee father. "The spirits recognize you as essential to their success, Elena." The first helicopter appeared over the tree line, its massive rotor wash, creating artificial winds that sent leaves and debris swirling through the clearing. Elena could see armed figures in tactical gear preparing to rappel from the aircraft, their equipment and movements suggesting they were prepared for significant resistance. "Federal agents, stand down and surrender the children," came a voice amplified by powerful speakers mounted on the helicopter. "We have legal authority to remove minors from dangerous situations, and this location has been classified as a threat to public safety." Sophia's laughter carried across the clearing despite the noise of the aircraft. "Legal authority means nothing in this sacred place. These mountains recognize only the law of the spirits and the ancient promises made between peoples." Diego raised his arms and began the transformation that Elena had witnessed many times, but still found breathtaking. His human form dissolved and reformed into the massive gray Volf that served as his spirit guide and primary identity. But this time the change seemed more dramatic, as if the approaching confrontation was drawing out powers that normally remained hidden. The Volf that had been Diego was larger and more imposing than Elena had ever seen before. His yellow eyes glowed with intelligence that transcended normal animal consciousness, and his presence radiated authority that made every creature in the clearing acknowledge his leadership. This was the Shadow Walker in his true form, the guardian of the sacred pack awakened to full power. Around the clearing, other pack members began their own transformations. Elena watched in amazement as several Cherokee men and women whom she had never seen before emerged from the forest and shifted into wolf forms that suggested they carried the same ancient bloodlines as Diego. The sacred pack was larger and more powerful than she had ever imagined. "How many of you are there?" Elena asked Sophia, staring at the growing number of shapeshifters who were preparing for battle. Sophia's eyes gleamed with pride and ancient secrets. "Enough to protect the prophecy, child. The Shadow Walker bloodline has been carefully preserved through 7 generations, waiting for this moment when the twin guardians would need the full strength of their spiritual family." The helicopter began discharging personnel, men and women in tactical gear, who moved with military precision as they established a perimeter around the clearing. Elena could see that they carried weapons designed for capturing rather than killing. Tranquilizer guns and nets that suggested they intended to take prisoners rather than eliminate threats. Dr. Sarah Mitchell descended from the lead helicopter with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to command. Elena recognized her from news reports as a prominent geneticist who specialized in studying unusual human abilities. Her presence suggested that the corporate interests backing this operation had serious scientific ambitions for Maya and Alex. "Mrs. Vasquez," Dr. Mitchell called across the clearing, her voice carrying authority backed by federal law enforcement. "I am Dr. Sarah Mitchell from the Department of Extraordinary Phenomena. Your children have demonstrated abilities that pose potential threats to national security. We need to evaluate them in a controlled environment where their safety and the safety of others can be guaranteed." Elena stepped forward with determination that surprised her own heart. "My children are not threats to anyone. They are 2 years old, and they live in harmony with the natural world. The only danger here comes from people who want to exploit gifts they do not understand." Dr. Mitchell's expression remained professionally neutral, but Elena could see calculation behind her eyes as she studied the unprecedented gathering of wildlife that surrounded the clearing. "Mrs. Vasquez, your children appear to be exerting some form of control over dangerous wild animals. Bears, wolves, and other predators that should avoid human contact are instead gathering in numbers that suggest coordinated behavior. This represents a clear and present danger to anyone in the area." Diego stepped forward in his wolf form, his massive presence causing several of the federal agents to raise their weapons, despite their orders to capture rather than kill. The Shadow Walker's yellow eyes fixed on Dr. Mitchell with intelligence that transcended normal animal consciousness, and Elena could see the scientist struggling to maintain her composure in the face of something that challenged her understanding of natural law. "The animals are not being controlled," Elena explained with growing confidence. "They are choosing to protect children who speak to them with respect and understanding." Maya and Alex represent a bridge between human and animal consciousness, something that could benefit both species if approached with wisdom rather than fear. Dr. Mitchell pulled out a tablet computer and began displaying readings that Elena could not interpret, but which seemed to indicate high levels of unusual activity. "The electromagnetic signatures coming from this area are unlike anything our scientific literature. Your children are generating bioelectric fields that affect animal behavior on a massive scale. We need to understand how this is possible and whether it can be controlled or replicated." Sophia stepped forward with the dignified bearing of someone whose authority transcended government credentials or scientific degrees. "Dr. Mitchell, you are standing on sacred ground that has been protected by Cherokee tradition for over 300 years. The children you seek to study are the fulfillment of prophecies that your people lack the wisdom to understand." The scientist's expression shifted to professional interest as she recognized that she was dealing with someone who possessed knowledge relevant to her mission. "Mrs. I am Sophia Strongheart, keeper of the Cherokee oral traditions and guardian of the ancient prophecies. The children you call extraordinary are known to my people as the twin guardians, bridges between the human world and the spirit world of the animals. Dr. Mitchell made notes on her tablet while studying Sophia with the intensity of someone who had discovered an unexpected research opportunity. Mrs. Strongheart, if your people have historical knowledge about abilities like those demonstrated by Maya and Alex, that information could be invaluable to our research. We are prepared to offer significant compensation for your cooperation. Sophia's laugh carried the music of centuries of tradition passed down through generations of storytellers. Dr. Mitchell, the sacred knowledge of my people is not for sale to corporations who see only profit where we see spiritual responsibility. The twin guardians will fulfill their destiny according to the wisdom of the ancestors, not the greed of modern exploitation. Elena watched the exchange with growing understanding of the forces that were gathering around her family. This was not simply a confrontation between government authority and individual freedom. It was a clash between worldviews that represented fundamentally different approaches to understanding the relationship between humanity and the natural world. Maya and Alex had remained calm throughout the adult negotiations, but Elena could see that they were preparing for something that would demonstrate their abilities on a scale that none of the observers were prepared to witness. The twins stood hand in hand in the center of the clearing, their small faces serious with concentration beyond their years. Whatever they are planning to do, Elena said to Sophia with maternal concern. Should we try to stop them? They are still just children. Sophia's expression was filled with grandmother's pride mixed with spiritual awe. Elena, your children are about to show the world what the prophecy truly means. The twin guardians carry power that has been building through 7 generations of preparation. This is their moment to fulfill the destiny that brought them into existence. Dr. Mitchell raised her hand to signal her team to prepare for whatever demonstration was about to unfold. All personnel, monitor electromagnetic readings and be prepared to document any unusual phenomena. We need complete scientific records of whatever these children are capable of producing. Maya looked directly at Dr. Mitchell and spoke in clear English that carried across the clearing despite her young voice. You want to see what we can do? We will show you why the animal nations trust us more than they trust you. The demonstration that followed would be discussed in scientific circles for decades, challenging every assumption about the boundaries between human and animal consciousness. Maya and Alex raised their joined hands toward the sky and called out in voices that seemed to carry far beyond the immediate clearing. Elena watched in amazement as their call was answered by creatures from throughout the Blue Ridge Mountain ecosystem. The sky filled with birds in numbers that suggested every species for miles around was responding to the twins' summons. The forest erupted with the sounds of animals moving through the undergrowth, not in panic but in purposeful migration toward the sacred clearing. This is impossible, Dr. Mitchell whispered, staring at her tablet as readings indicated bioelectric activity on a scale that challenged her understanding of biological systems. The electromagnetic signatures are affecting animal behavior across hundreds of square miles. Diego and his pack took up positions around the federal agents, not threatening but clearly demonstrating that the humans were outnumbered by forces they had never imagined encountering. Elena could see fear beginning to replace professional confidence in the faces of people who had expected to deal with unusual children rather than supernatural phenomena. The twin guardians are calling upon the ancient promise, Sophia announced. With reverence, every creature that honors the sacred connection between peoples will answer their summons. What Elena witnessed next would remain etched in her memory for the rest of her life. Maya and Alex began speaking in harmonized voices that seemed to blend human language with sounds that transcended normal communication. Their words carried across the clearing and into the forest, creating responses from animals that suggested genuine conversation rather than simple summoning. Bears emerged from the tree line and took up positions that clearly indicated they were following strategic instructions. Wolves arranged themselves in formations that demonstrated tactical thinking beyond normal pack behavior. Even the birds, overhead began flying in patterns that created a living canopy above the clearing. Their movements coordinated with precision that suggested intelligent command and control. They are not controlling the animals, Elena realized with wonder. They are communicating with them as military commanders communicate with trusted soldiers. The creatures are choosing to follow their leadership. Dr. Mitchell's professional composure finally cracked as she realized that her scientific expedition had encountered forces that operated beyond the boundaries of conventional research. Command, we need immediate backup and additional containment equipment. The situation here is beyond our initial parameters. Sophia stepped forward with the quiet authority of someone whose wisdom had been earned through decades of studying forces that existed beyond normal human experience. Dr. Mitchell, your equipment and your weapons are useless against the power that flows through these children. They are protected by magic that your science cannot measure or control. Elena felt power building around her children as their demonstration reached its crescendo. The very air seemed to shimmer with energy as Maya and Alex called upon forces that had been waiting 7 generations for this moment of revelation. The ancient prophecy was being fulfilled in ways that none of them had fully anticipated. The ultimate test had begun, and Elena realized that the outcome would determine not just the fate of her family, but the future relationship between humanity and the natural world that surrounded them. The twin guardians were ready to prove that bridges between worlds were possible if both sides approached each other with respect rather than fear. The confrontation that would decide everything was about to reach its climax, and Elena could only watch with pride and terror as her 2-year-old children prepared to change the world. The air itself seemed to pulse with ancient power as Maya and Alex stood at the center of the clearing, their small hands raised toward the mountain peaks that surrounded their sacred home. What began as a demonstration for skeptical scientists had evolved into something far more profound, an awakening of forces that had slumbered in the Blue Ridge Mountains since the Cherokee people first learned to speak with the wolf spirits. Dr. Mitchell stared at her instruments in disbelief as electromagnetic readings spiked beyond anything her equipment was designed to measure. The bioelectric fields generated by the 2-year-old twins were affecting animal behavior across an area that encompassed thousands of square miles, creating a phenomenon that challenged every scientific principle she had spent her career studying. "This is impossible," Dr. Mitchell whispered, watching her tablet display readings that suggested the children were somehow interfacing with the nervous systems of every creature within the mountain ecosystem. Human beings cannot generate electromagnetic fields of this magnitude. The energy output would require biological systems that simply do not exist. Sophia stepped forward with the serene confidence of someone whose understanding came from sources beyond scientific measurement. "Dr. Mitchell, your instruments can only detect the physical manifestations of forces that operate primarily in the spiritual realm. Maya and Alex are not generating power. They are serving as conduits for energies that have existed in these mountains since the world was young." Elena watched her children with a mixture of maternal pride and overwhelming awe as their demonstration continued to unfold. Maya's voice rose in harmonized sounds that seemed to blend Cherokee chanting with wolf howls, while Alex responded with bird calls that carried meanings far beyond simple animal communication. Together, they were creating a symphony that spoke directly to the consciousness of every living creature within range of their influence. The response from the animal kingdom was beyond anything Elena had witnessed during their 2 years in the wolf den. Bears emerged from hibernation despite the season being wrong for such behavior. Deer approached the clearing without their normal caution around human presence. Even creatures that should have been natural enemies stood side by side, united by their shared recognition of the twin guardians' authority. "The ancient compact is being renewed," Diego announced, his wolf form radiating satisfaction as he observed the fulfillment of prophecies that had guided his people for 7 generations. The animal nations are formally acknowledging Maya and Alex as the bridges between worlds that the Cherokee legends promised would one day appear. Dr. Mitchell's federal agents exchanged nervous glances as they found themselves surrounded by hundreds of wild animals that showed no fear of human weapons or authority. Bears that could easily overpower armed soldiers positioned themselves with calm deliberation around the perimeter of the clearing. Wolves moved with military precision to block every possible escape route. Even the sky above them was dominated by birds of prey whose presence transformed the afternoon light into shifting patterns of shadow and brightness. "Command, we need immediate extraction," one of the agents spoke into his radio with barely controlled panic. "The situation has escalated beyond our containment capabilities. We are dealing with phenomena that our training did not prepare us for." The response from federal headquarters crackled through the radio with professional tension. "Negative. On extraction. Hold your position and continue documenting the anomalous activity. Higher authorities want complete records of whatever is happening at your location." Elena felt a surge of protective anger as she realized that the government officials commanding this operation were prepared to sacrifice their own agents in order to gather intelligence about her children. "Dr. Mitchell, you need to evacuate your people before this situation becomes dangerous for everyone involved." Dr. Mitchell studied the unprecedented gathering of wildlife with scientific fascination that outweighed her concern for personal safety. "Mrs. Vasquez, we are witnessing the most significant breakthrough in interspecies communication in human history. These children are demonstrating abilities that could revolutionize our understanding of consciousness itself. We cannot simply walk away from such a discovery." Sophia's laugh carried the wisdom of someone who had spent decades watching outsiders attempt to quantify mysteries that existed beyond the reach of conventional understanding. "Dr. Mitchell, you speak of discovery as if my people have not been living with these truths for centuries. The twin guardians represent the return of knowledge that was never lost, only hidden from those who lacked the wisdom to use it responsibly." Maya and Alex began moving through the clearing with purpose that seemed guided by intelligence beyond their chronological age. They approached each group of animals with gestures and sounds that appeared to constitute genuine conversation, receiving responses that suggested the creatures understood not just their words, but their intentions. Elena watched in amazement as her daughter communicated with a family of black bears, her tiny hands moving in patterns that seemed to carry specific meanings, while her voice produced sounds that the massive animals clearly recognized as their own language. Alex was engaged in what appeared to be a strategic discussion with the wolf pack leaders, his chirps and whistles creating responses that indicated complex information was being exchanged. "They are not just talking to the animals," Elena realized with growing wonder. "They are negotiating with them. They are making agreements and establishing relationships based on mutual respect and understanding." Diego's transformation back to human form allowed him to provide translation for the remarkable conversations taking place around them. Maya is explaining to the bear families that their territories will be protected from human encroachment if they agree to serve as guardians for specific areas of the mountain preserve. Alex is organizing the wolf packs into a communications network that will monitor federal activity throughout the region. Dr. Mitchell frantically documented everything she witnessed, her scientific training warring with evidence that challenged her fundamental assumptions about the nature of intelligence and consciousness. The complexity of the communication patterns is beyond anything in our research literature. These children are demonstrating linguistic abilities that suggest they have developed entirely new forms of language that bridge species barriers. Sophia approached Dr. Mitchell with the patient expression of a teacher addressing a particularly slow student. "Dr. Mitchell, you are observing the restoration of abilities that humans possessed before they forgot how to listen to the voices of their animal relatives. Maya and Alex have not developed new languages. They have remembered ancient ones that your people abandoned when they chose dominance over cooperation. The federal agents found themselves becoming increasingly irrelevant as the focus of the gathering shifted from confrontation to celebration. Elena could see that the animals were not viewing the humans as threats to be eliminated, but as witnesses to be educated. The twin guardians were using this moment to demonstrate possibilities that could transform the relationship between civilization and the natural world. "Dr. Mitchell," Maya said, approaching the scientist with the confident stride of someone much older than her 2 years. "You want to study us because you think we are different from other humans. But we are not different. We are remembering what all humans used to know before they forgot how to listen to their animal relatives." Alex joined his sister, his young voice carrying authority that seemed to resonate from sources beyond his physical form. "The animal nations do not want to be your enemies, but they will defend themselves if you continue to treat them as property to be exploited rather than people to be respected." Dr. Mitchell knelt to bring herself to the children's eye level, her scientific curiosity overwhelming her caution as she engaged directly with the subjects of her research. "Maya, Alex, what you are doing here is remarkable. If we could understand how your abilities work, we might be able to teach other people to communicate with animals the way you do. Think about how much good that could accomplish." Elena stepped forward with protective determination as she recognized the familiar pattern of adults attempting to exploit her children's gifts. "Dr. Mitchell, my children are not laboratory specimens to be studied and replicated. They are people with their own rights and their own destiny to fulfill." Sophia's expression hardened with the resolve of someone whose spiritual responsibilities transcended political considerations. "Dr. Mitchell, the abilities you seek to understand cannot be reproduced through scientific analysis or technological manipulation. They arise from spiritual connections that must be earned through respect, wisdom, and sacred responsibility." Maya looked directly at Dr. Mitchell with eyes that seemed to hold wisdom far beyond her age. "Dr. Mitchell, we could teach some humans to speak with animals the way we do. But first, the humans would have to prove they would use such gifts to help rather than to harm. Most humans are not ready for such responsibility." Alex nodded in agreement with his sister's assessment. The animal nations have been watching human behavior for many years. They see how humans treat creatures they consider less intelligent. They see the pollution, the habitat destruction, the casual cruelty. Why would they want to communicate with people who might use that communication to exploit them more efficiently? Dr. Mitchell stared at the twins, with growing recognition that she was dealing with individuals whose intellectual and spiritual development far exceeded anything her research had prepared her to encounter. "You are saying that the animals are making conscious decisions about whether to trust humans with expanded communication abilities." Diego stepped forward to support the children's explanation with adult authority. "Dr. Mitchell, the animal nations are not primitive creatures operating on simple instinct. They are intelligent beings with their own cultures, their own values, and their own criteria for evaluating potential allies. The twin guardians have earned their trust through demonstrated respect and genuine care for animal welfare." Elena watched with pride as her children articulated concepts that many adults struggled to understand. Despite their age, Maya and Alex possessed wisdom that came from their unique position as bridges between human and animal consciousness. They understood both perspectives and could evaluate the potential consequences of sharing their gifts with the wider world. What would it take for humans to earn that trust? Dr. Mitchell asked, her scientific interest gradually transforming into something approaching genuine respect for the forces she was encountering. Sophia smiled with the satisfaction of someone whose teaching had finally reached a receptive student. "Dr. Mitchell, the answer to that question is the reason why the twin guardians were born. They will spend their lives demonstrating how humans can live in harmony with the natural world rather than attempting to dominate it." Maya and Alex exchanged looks that seemed to carry entire conversations before returning their attention to the assembled adults. "Dr. Mitchell, we will make you an offer. You can take some of us back to your laboratories to be studied like specimens. Or you can leave us here to grow and learn, and when we are older, we will come to the human cities to teach what we have discovered." Elena felt her heart race as she realized her children were proposing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good of their mission. "Maya, Alex, you are not going anywhere with these people. You are staying here where you are safe and protected." Alex reached out and took his mother's hand with gentle reassurance. "Mama, we are not offering to go with them now. We are offering to come to them later, when we are old enough to protect ourselves and wise enough to teach what they need to learn." Dr. Mitchell studied the twins with professional fascination, mixed with growing respect for their maturity and wisdom. "What exactly are you proposing?" Maya's voice carried the authority of someone whose destiny had been shaped by prophecies that span generations. "We are proposing a new relationship between human science and animal wisdom. Instead of trying to capture and control what you do not understand, you could learn to participate in connections that benefit everyone." Sophia nodded with approval, as she witnessed the fulfillment of prophecies that had guided her entire life. "The twin guardians are offering to serve as ambassadors between worlds. Dr. Mitchell, they will bridge the gap between human knowledge and animal wisdom, creating possibilities that neither species could achieve alone." Elena looked around at the extraordinary gathering of wildlife that surrounded them, marveling at the peaceful coexistence that her children had somehow orchestrated. Bears and wolves rested side by side, while birds of every species perched in the trees above them. The clearing had become a living demonstration of the harmony that was possible when different forms of consciousness treated each other with respect and understanding. "Dr. Mitchell," Elena said with growing confidence in her role as the mother of children destined to change the world, "you came here expecting to capture specimens for study. Instead, you have witnessed the birth of a new age in human-animal relations. The choice you make now will determine whether your people become part of that future or remain trapped in patterns of exploitation that serve no one." Dr. Mitchell looked at her instruments one final time, noting readings that indicated the electromagnetic phenomena generated by the twins were beginning to stabilize at levels that suggested permanent, rather than temporary changes in the local ecosystem. "The bioelectric fields are becoming integrated with the natural environment. Whatever these children have accomplished here, it appears to be creating lasting alterations in how animals in this region interact with each other and with humans." Diego's expression carried satisfaction, mixed with protective vigilance as he observed the federal agents beginning to understand the true significance of what they had witnessed. "Dr. Mitchell, the twin guardians have demonstrated that the ancient prophecies were accurate in their predictions. The age of harmony between species has begun, but it will require cooperation rather than control from the human side." Maya and Alex approached Dr. Mitchell one final time, their small hands reaching out to touch her equipment with curiosity rather than fear. "Dr. Mitchell, your machines can measure some of what we do, but they cannot understand why we do it. The real power comes from love, respect, and the willingness to see other beings as equals rather than resources." Elena watched with amazement as her children's touch caused Dr. Mitchell's instruments to display readings that suggested the devices themselves were somehow being influenced by the twins' presence. "What are they doing to your equipment?" Dr. Mitchell stared at her tablet in wonder as complex patterns appeared on the screen. Data configurations that seemed to represent some form of communication rather than simple electromagnetic measurements. "The devices are receiving information, but not through any input methods I recognize. It is as if the children are directly interfacing with the electronic systems." Alex looked up at Dr. Mitchell with eyes that held depths far beyond his years. "Dr. Mitchell, machines can be taught to listen to animal voices just like humans can. But first, the people who build the machines must learn to listen with their hearts instead of just their minds. Sophia's voice carried the weight of prophecy, fulfilled as she observed the miraculous interaction between ancient wisdom and modern technology. The twin guardians will bridge more than just the gap between humans and animals, Dr. Mitchell. They will help humanity understand how to integrate spiritual wisdom with scientific knowledge. Elena felt tears of pride and joy streaming down her face as she realized the full scope of what her children were destined to accomplish. They were not just bridges between species, but catalysts for a transformation that would affect every aspect of human civilization's relationship with the natural world. Dr. Mitchell, Elena said with determination, born of maternal love and spiritual awakening. You came here representing forces that wanted to capture and control my children. You are leaving with an invitation to participate in changes that will benefit everyone. The choice of how your people respond to that invitation will determine their place in the future that Maya and Alex are creating. Dr. Mitchell slowly lowered her instruments and looked around at the peaceful gathering of humans and animals that the twins had orchestrated. Mrs. Vasquez, I came here expecting to encounter a threat to national security. Instead, I have witnessed the most hopeful demonstration of human potential that I have ever experienced. Sophia stepped forward with the dignity of someone whose life's work was reaching its intended culmination. Dr. Mitchell, you will return to your superiors with a choice to present to them. They can continue trying to control forces they do not understand, or they can participate in the birth of a new age where human intelligence and animal wisdom work together for the benefit of all life. Elena watched as Dr. Mitchell signaled her agents to begin withdrawing from the clearing, their weapons lowered and their hostile posture replaced by something approaching respectful recognition. The confrontation that could have ended in violence had been transformed into an opportunity for education and growth. We will be in contact, Dr. Mitchell announced as she prepared to leave. The twin guardians have presented possibilities that my organization will need time to evaluate and understand. But I can promise you that our approach to this situation will be very different from what we originally planned. Diego's transformation back to wolf form allowed him to escort the federal agents to the edge of his territory with honor rather than hostility. The Shadow Walker pack flanked the human visitors with protective dignity, ensuring their safe passage while making it clear that the sacred ground would remain under the guardianship of forces that transcended government authority. As the helicopters departed and silence returned to the clearing, Elena found herself alone with her children and the extended family of humans and animals that had become their world. The ultimate test had been passed, not through violence or domination, but through demonstration of possibilities that offered hope for a better future. Maya and Alex settled into their mother's arms with the contentment of children who had successfully completed a challenging task. Mama, the animal nations are happy now. They know that some humans remember how to listen with respect. Elena looked around at the peaceful gathering that surrounded them, marveling at the transformation that had taken place in just a few hours. What happens now, my darlings? What comes next in your remarkable journey? Sophia approached with the satisfaction of someone whose life's purpose had been fulfilled beyond her wildest dreams. Now they grow and learn. Elena, the twin guardians will spend their childhood mastering the gifts they have inherited while the world prepares for the changes they will bring when they reach maturity. Elena nodded with understanding born of spiritual awakening and maternal wisdom. Her children were not just extraordinary individuals, but catalysts for transformations that would ripple across generations. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but the real work was just beginning. Years would pass before the full impact of Maya and Alex's demonstration would be understood by the wider world. Universities would establish new departments dedicated to studying interspecies communication. Government policies would evolve to recognize animal intelligence and rights. Environmental protection would be transformed from human obligation to cooperative partnership between species. But in the sacred clearing where it all began, Elena held her children close and listened to the gentle sounds of wolves, settling in for the evening while birds sang lullabies from the ancient trees. The twin guardians had found their place in the world, and the world would never be the same because of the love and wisdom they carried within their remarkable hearts. The gentle giant who had first protected a pregnant widow in the wolf den had helped give birth to a new age of harmony between all the children of the earth. Diego's faith in the ancient prophecies had been vindicated beyond measure, proving that sometimes the most extraordinary miracles grow from the smallest acts of compassion and courage. Elena smiled as she watched her children drift toward sleep, surrounded by the family of humans and animals who would help them fulfill their destiny as bridges between worlds. The sacred twins had been born to heal the wounds between peoples, and their journey was just beginning. The prophecy was complete, but the legacy would continue for generations yet to come. Maya and Alex would grow up to teach humanity that being different was not the same as being less valuable, and that the greatest gifts often came in forms that society was too blind to recognize until love opened their eyes to see the infinite worth that existed within every beating heart. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.